Hi, everybody.
Wait, I have to mute this because I have to cough. Hold on. All right, folks. Listen, we have got a lot to talk about. Ooh. David and I witnessed the unthinkable, and we are going to talk about that. And I can tell you right now, you do not want to miss that conversation. There is a lot to be said about what we witnessed. I'll give you a hint. The state of Israel allowed our eyes and ears to behold classified material, highly classified material, by the way. We're not joking about that. It really is. That in and of itself, there's a lot to be said there, and we'll get into that. We're going to take a moment to talk about my pastor, Pastor Jeff. I think that's such a great idea for us to sit and have a conversation about him because he was an extraordinary man. And it's funny, it's funny how when people move on to be with the Lord, or in other cases, if you're not like a guy like Jeff and you don't go to be with the Lord, it's funny how when people die, and I don't like using the term "die" with Pastor Jeff because he's more alive now than he ever has been. Right?
Mine. He's surfing the glass sea.
That's right. Yep. Amen. So I will say this. It's funny how people begin to have recollections that were never really true, and people say all kinds of like crazy things like, "Oh, we were best friends," and I'm seeing a lot of those posts.
Here come out the stories.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of those posts right now. But I will tell you something that is interesting. I am so grateful for what God gave me in Pastor Jeff, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I have been relatively silent online. I think for the most part, what I did was I put up a bunch of pictures of us together, and a few with me and you, actually, me and you and Jeff, and one with a couple with me and my wife, and Jeff and Karen. And my words were short. It was something like, "Well done, good and faithful servant. I love you," and we kind of left it at that. But I will tell you, he was a pretty extraordinary man. And so we're going to talk about him. And then the other thing that we're going to do is, I have it literally hot off the press, right? There is an article that I was not aware of, by the way, that David just told me about.
Dropped on you.
Yeah, which Russia invited Hamas, okay, and the Palestinian Authority with other terrorist groups to come to Moscow and have a conversation. On the Bible prophecy front, this might be one of the biggest stories we've read.
This is kind of cool. Okay,
it's a huge story.
It's not only the Hamas and the authority, because it's not a political. They also want the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is by definition an Islamic jihadi terrorist organization.
That's right.
And any of the other terrorist organizations, Palestinians, they're trying to bring them all, or sew them all, or glue them all together. And let's talk about what that means and how that's going to play a role.
Which means, based on what I'm reading here, that Iran is going to be in this meeting.
Yep. Because
I'm looking at some of these names. Right? Musa Abu Marzouk, which, by the way, that's, I don't even want to, I'm looking at these stories right now that it just boggles my mind, by the way, looking at some of that and looking at some of the leaders.
Well,
boy,
we need to figure out what Russia is doing here.
Yeah, I have some ideas based on what I think the Bible says, or what I know what the Bible says. I have some ideas where I think I know what's actually going on with Russia, and it makes sense, and it all fits together in the biblical narrative. So we'll have a conversation about Russia. That's going to be a good conversation, by the way. As a matter of fact, I will probably make a video on this because this is a pretty significant story.
This is how do you say, a gluing together in a way that I find, okay, you make your video. I think I'm going to pull a Balagan connection about this.
Oh, you have to. You have to, bro. You have to give your perspective on this. We are going to be releasing, by the way, an episode of Balagan Connection at 2 p.m. today, which we're very excited about. It's a really good one, by the way.
It's connected to what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. And like I like to do in other places, I'm going to be connecting, and again, I'm going to use what we talked about. I'm going to be connecting what happened, or let's put it this way. What happened 2,000 years ago when Jesus was crucified by the Romans, what happened in the 7th of October that we actually experienced in Los Angeles, and my own personal war experiences from southern Lebanon. So that's an interesting connection to pull together.
Yeah, and it's exciting because I'm looking at everybody's response to David's video that he did last week. If you've not seen it, you should watch it, David. I'm telling you, I'm looking at the stats right now. Those are record-breaking numbers. It's really exciting to see the response.
Yeah.
It's a great response. It's good. It's really, really good to see people listening to a very important and significant message. And I think you have one. I think it's good. I'm glad to see that happen.
What I think people are tying into is connecting things that we see on the ground today, things that are happening in the world today, and biblical aspects, especially connected to Israel itself. And I think that's kind of fun. So connect, subscribe. I need some more subscribers. I need to break to 12,000.
We'll do that. And and guys, I would very much appreciate it, because I think that the more support we can give David, I think the more we enable him to do the work that I believe God's called him to do. And it's good stuff. It's really, really good stuff. So I'm very excited about what's happening.
So how do we want to start, Jim?
Okay, so should we talk a little bit about Pastor Jeff?
Yeah. You see that I'm in mourning.
Yeah.
According to Jewish tradition, for the first year, you are by designation in mourning. By the way, very interesting. Maybe sometime later in this discussion, we'll talk about
This is Egyptian culture, by the way. We do the same thing 1 year.
Different Christian and Jewish, how do you say, mourning traditions, which I'm in a very unique position to kind of bounce around on today. But Jeff Johnson was the pastor of Calvary Chapel Downey, one of the pastors that connected to Chuck Smith. But I didn't really know Jeff in his pastor mode here. Okay, I knew Jeff in his pastor mode when he came to Israel
With the group,
and sat on my bus. And one of the things, and again, I'm a tour guide. One of the reasons I am connected to Jeff and Karen Johnson and connected to the Johnson family, and now actually connected to Christy, is that what Jeff had is what I didn't see in a lot of pastors that I saw on some of the buses, and that is humility. He was humble. He was totally humble. And again, you hear this is, the pastor of a big church in the United States, and I see how some of them act. And then you get on the bus, and he's just a regular guy, and we had some amazing discussions on the bus. He used to sing on the bus, and he kind of terrible singer. I mean,
I liked his singing. I don't know about you. I thought he was a good singer. I liked his singer.
I mean, almost as bad as I'm not.
He could hold a tune, David. He could at least hold a tune. He was a good singer.
Now, who am I to say anything about anybody singing?
See,
Okay.
David comes to bash his father-in-law's voice right on the show.
And we fell in love with each other.
I'd give anything to hear him sing again, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And the way that he accepted me, and again, don't forget, I wasn't a believer here in the beginning, which was kind of cool. I'm going to say something kind of weird. A lot of people don't know I was a heavy smoker back then, and that really kind of creeped everybody out. They couldn't really understand who I was.
I remember the smoking days.
And I stepped into the role of his mythological tour guide, also another David Kidron, and we hit it off right from the beginning. And there was a, well, I'm going to say it like this. Because of Jeff, I have this kind of term that I use. If my family had stayed in California, I don't know if you know, I was born in San Diego, literally on Miramar Naval Base or Balboa Hospital. But if my parents had stayed in San Diego or Southern California instead of going off to Moody and going off to Israel, my dad would have been a Calvary Chapel pastor.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly.
And he reminded me of Jeff, or Jeff reminded me of my dad so much. They had the same humility, the same Bible-centered, this is my God-centered life. I mean, everything about him was God-centered. On the other hand, he was very humble, and I remember coming to visit them for the first time, and they came to pick me up in the car, and I say, "Whose car is this?" And he says, "It's my car." I said, "What do you mean, my car? I'm used to having, pastors have Mercedes and have all kinds of cars." And he has this old Land Cruiser that I don't even know. I think it's as old as I am. And the humility really struck me deep. And it was because of that I decided to allow Jeff to become part of my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And this is way before I knew Christy and way before I knew the rest of the family, is that Jeff and Karen on their kitchen table, on the series, couple of visits when I came out to speak in the States, and it was Jeff's simplicity, because I don't take the BS from all kinds of people.
Okay.
And it was Jeff's simplicity that allowed me to open up and go deep into my spiritual connection to God. And it wasn't by chance that my own spiritual event actually happened while I was staying at Jeff and Karen's house.
Yeah, it's not a surprise. Yeah, Jeff was very much that way, and I could tell you story after story after story after story. One of perhaps the most interesting ones, really early memory of Jeff, was when I first started teaching the Bible, and I had started teaching the Bible maybe 2 months after I got saved, or 3 months after I got saved. I was 16 years old. I started teaching at a home Bible study. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was a pretty prominent guy in the church. And my understanding was also a pretty big donor, and, he's a very influential guy. Went to Pastor Jeff and said something to the effect of, my granddaughter or something like that is going to this home Bible study that James is teaching, and I don't want a kid teaching, so he needs to go. And Pastor Jeff told the guy, and I didn't even know this story because, well, I wasn't supposed to know the story, but Karen told me the story, right? Karen always was in my ear. She always told me all kinds of things that I probably wasn't supposed to know at the time, but that was the way she was to me. She was like overprotective mom in many ways. And her and my mom were very close friends. They were very, very close. So she came to me, she said, I'm just going to have spiritual warfare is real. And I forgot exactly what she said, but she basically told me that this guy wanted me out, and basically Pastor Jeff said, sorry, it's not going to happen. And then the guy says, well, then I may end up, leaving the church. And Pastor Jeff said, okay, well, God bless you. See you later. Which was, I just thought that was pretty unique. So it's kind of interesting how that whole thing kind of did what it did. And of course, there was a lot of years behind us. I mean, we've always been very, very close over the years, and it was a tremendous loss. I remember my very first years as a senior pastor, a little bit of history. Pastor Jeff used to tell me all throughout the 14, 15 years that I was serving him, he used to tell me all the time, even before I was an assistant pastor, he would say, because I would go to him and I'd say, what kind of a dumb decision was that? And that was the way I talked to him. I was like very real with him, and he would say, when you're a senior pastor, you'll understand. And it's funny because he believed that one day I would be a senior pastor. So let me just say this. The very first day that I was officially on staff, right? It was the very first day. So many guys they were so jealous of me. I didn't realize it back then, but I know it now, right? And Jeff basically told the secretary, because you always had to tell the secretary before you had to go to lunch, right? The one that was at the desk. He tells the secretary, he says, I'm going to lunch and I'm taking James. Okay, Pastor Jeff, when are you coming back? Don't ask. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is crazy. So I learned a few things on that first day. First of all, I learned how technologically backwards he was. Yep. Later on, he got pretty hip to it, right? A lot more than he was. Look, back then, bro, he would give me the ATM card and he would say, I think this is my code. I don't know how to use that machine. This is how much money I need. Okay.
And that's okay.
So
he
that was
better.
the way he was.
He was better than that.
Bro, and that was him in his, 40s or 50s, right? No, I think in his 40s at the time, right? So, yeah, 40s or maybe late 40s, early 50s. So what he does is we go to lunch. One of the places that he always liked to eat, I still remember we ate at the Mexican place that he always loved. And then he says, okay, we're going for a drive. So he starts driving and he goes to Furman Park. This is in Downey. And he says, does this park mean anything to you? And I said, well, I've been here. It's kind of it's the park more for the rich people because it's in Northern Downey. And I was kind of joking around with him. He says, okay. He says, this is why this park should mean something to you. Okay. He says, this is where Calvary Chapel Downey had its very first service. Yeah. And so what he did was he told me what was going through his mind. He told me who was there, was his wife. I think it was just Christy at the time. And he's telling me all these different stories of what he was thinking. Then he says, okay, let's go. So then we went to another building or another place. And it was this little building. It was like this little insurance sales building that had like, maybe you could fit 5 people in there, right? And he says, this is the second place we met as a church.
It was a store.
And it was like a little storefront. And he says, this is what I was thinking. This is what's going on. And then he manages to take me. This is a 2.5-hour tour. He takes me to every place in Downey that they met and told me what his thinking process was, the barriers he ran into. I remember when we pulled up in front of Big Five, he's like, this is the story of all kinds of drama. And he told me of how he thought he was ready to go full time. He stopped being a pipe worker, a pipe fitter, and thought he was good. And then he had to go back and what was going through his mind and the fights that he had with his board and all the other things like that. But what was striking to me was that first day, at the very end, Jeff told me, he made it very, very clear. He said, these are things that I want you to remember for the future. And I knew for a fact that Jeff knew that one day I would be a senior pastor. And actually, matter of fact, I think I had talked to him about that a few years back, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and he told me he'd never done that with anybody else.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is but I knew that, right? He had always called me his Timothy, and there was always that kind of a relationship. But I learned a lot from that, and it's so going back to that. So we would always argue when I was serving with him, like that's wrong. What kind of a dumb decision was that? And I didn't really care about the paycheck. I cared about him, and I cared about doing what was right with the Lord. And we would fight and fight and fight. And he would say, James, when you're a senior pastor, you'll understand. So I remembered starting Calvary Chapel Signal Hill, and I remembered week one, I called Jeff one day and I went, you're right. He goes, what do you mean, man? What do you mean? You're right, bro. That's all I got to say. What do you mean? And we just started going. I think Jeff must have had 50 calls in the first year. He's like, okay, what was it this time? What is it this time? What is it this time? And I'd say, you were right about this. You were right about that. You were right about this. I was wrong here. I was wrong there.
Well, he taught and mentored and trained and pulled up a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And
undoubtedly.
I'm proud to say I was one of them. Though I got...
But I was his favorite. You do know that, right?
Oh, here we go.
I'm just saying. Well, he called me a son before he called you one.
Well, that's true, but he gave me his daughter.
That's okay.
Do we really want to do this? And I know Karen and Christy are laughing right now.
Although I will say that I think me and Christy had the most fun together over the years. Linda got herself in some big trouble when we would go overseas. That she was Tara was always kind of in the middle.
Now we got to be really, really careful. We're on there, Republican. This is my family, James. Okay, I got to have a Shabbat dinner with them next week.
Speaking of trouble, Karen was the queen of all that.
Who?
Karen.
Really?
Oh my goodness, bro! I could tell you story after story after story after story.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of be careful here.
Jeff
mother-in-law
used to check her. Jeff used to be like, "Okay, can I just give you one? This is just one."
I am taking no responsibility, Karen. It's not me, it's him.
Okay. We're at the Vatican. This is no joke. This is either my first or second trip to Israel. I've been there 8 or 9 times. My first or second trip to Israel, we stop in Rome, right? It's part of our tour. And part of the tour, it was interesting when we got to the Vatican, all the women seemed to be in love with the artwork and enthralled with all of the nonsense and all of the stuff
that artwork walks the line in a couple of subjects.
Yeah. Okay. It does. Some of it's very anti-Semitic. That's a whole other story. So anyway, we walk into St. Peter's Square that's empty at the time. It's completely empty. And the tour guide tells us that it's about to be full because the Pope's going to come out, right? So I tell Jeff, I'm like, this is dumb. I don't care about the Pope, right? That's what I tell him. I say, let's blow this joint. So me and Jeff tell Karen, hey, well, we're going to go get some coffee, right? So we come back, or we leave, and Karen says, I'm coming with you, right? So the rest of the group is doing their thing. So we go have our coffee, our cup of coffee. And I'm like, I tell Jeff, I said, do we really have to go back out there to watch the Pope? Like, really? And Karen says, you better behave. You both better behave. That's what she's telling us, right?
She just, I can hear Karen saying that to both of us too.
So Jeff and I walk out to St. Peter's Square, and I'm shocked. I'm like, I cannot believe what I'm looking at. The place is, I mean, shoulder to shoulder, completely full. People of all walks of life praying, waiting for the Pope, crying for him to come out, all of this stuff. There was even one guy that we came across. Karen might remember this guy. There was one guy who had a box of rosaries, a big old box of rosaries. And he was like, hey, bro, what's going on? And I'm like, what, are you selling those things?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he says, no, bro, I'm not selling them. I'm going to sell them when I go back to America, bro. I'm like, and he's a surfer guy. I said, what do you mean? He goes, once the Pope blesses this, what used to be worth, $5 is going to be worth 50, bro. I'm going to make a whole living on this. So anyway, we see a lot of these different people, all different types of walks of life. So finally, the Pope comes out, and people are crying, and they're doing their nonsense, right? Their Pope worship nonsense, right? It was kind of ridiculous. So me and Jeff are just, I'm cracking jokes, and I'm actually spurring Jeff on, and Jeff's laughing, and we're going back and forth, and pretty soon we start going back and forth saying, so Pope on a rope, so Pope on a rope. And we're saying it louder and louder. He's saying it, then I'm saying it, he's saying it, and I'm saying it. And we're just laughing and laughing, and we're joking and we're laughing. And Karen looks at me and she says, James, you're encouraging Jeff. Jeff, you know better. This isn't like she's being...
No, I've heard that from
angry
Karen.
mom.
I've heard that from Karen a lot of times.
So she says, you both know better. And the next person that spurs anybody on, you're going to see what happens, right? And she's mad. Like, she's very, very mad. So we're quiet for a minute, and we start up again. So Pope on a rope. So, I told you both, shut up, right? She's mad, right? So then finally I just say, okay, we'll wait. And then a minute or two goes by, and I just can't resist. So I turn around to Jeff, and I go, hey, bro, look up there. See, he's got that robe? I guarantee you the only thing he's got under that robe is just a set of boxers. That's it. And dude, not more than about a half a second after the word boxers comes out of my mouth, all I see coming from the corner of my eye is Karen's hand coming at me. And she slaps me, literally slaps my face. And she says, I told you to stop. And these nuns that are like right around us just start clapping and cheering for Karen slapping me in the face.
I think she's kind of changed. I haven't gotten slapped by Karen yet.
Karen has not changed.
Well,
Karen is not different. She's still a fiery. Same Karen. She's wiser about how it comes out, I think.
Okay.
But she made a lot of nuns happy that day.
Okay. Well, got to be careful not to go there. But I do want to come back, okay, to a great man.
Yeah, he was.
And he impacted his surroundings in a great way, and I'm glad to say that I'm one of those impacted in a lot of different ways, and he's going to be sorely missed.
He was never fearful, never ever fearful about having people around him that he perceived as having a different talent or a greater knowledge than him. He was never threatened. Look, I'm going to just tell you this. Almost all of the guys that I worked with in those early years at Downey were threatened in one way or another by people around them that were what they perceived to be smarter or greater vocabulary or whatever. Jeff was nothing like that.
No.
Jeff loved having people around him that he felt like could bring something to the table that would educate him on things. And he didn't, he was very bold about it. He didn't care. And the other thing that I really liked about him too, that was pretty substantial, and you learn a lot from it. A lot of what I saw in him, he reinforced what I already was taught by my own father and mother, which is what made it really easy. But one of the cool aspects of something that he did that I just thought was really cool was he demonstrated what it meant to trust in the Lord. He would tell me to do the most outrageous things in the world, and would just say, just do it, and just say God sent you.
God's going to take care of that.
God's going to take care of it. And I would go, bro, you don't understand. This is not reality. I can't just go and ask for this. Yes, you can. What are they going to do? Say no? He said, you have God with you. And so I would go and I would ask for the most ridiculous things for him. Right. And it was almost like the guy that I would ask was waiting there to give it to me. It was weird. And now I'm very much that way. I'll ask for anything.
And I need to tie one more thing, because without this, talking about Jeff would not be, how do you say, the full understanding of, he had a deep love for Israel.
Oh, 100%.
A deep, deep love. And again, I get to see him all the time, and I get to compare. This is a man who had the love for Israel in his veins, and not only because Pastor Chuck said to do it, that might be part of it. Not only because it was, the accepted, he really did love Israel and the Jewish people, and I will never forget that.
Yeah, and I think there's also one thing that I should probably say about Pastor Jeff, because over the years, our relationship had changed pretty substantially in many ways. At one point, the relationship, if I could describe it specifically, was almost like a little bird with his mouth open, waiting for, the dad bird to feed him. And that was kind of the way it was with me and Jeff early on. And as we grew, as I grew, and things began to change, our relationship had changed a lot. And over the years, it had become the type of relationship where Jeff would no longer say, he would no longer call me and go, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. He would call me and he would say, and most people never knew that these types of conversations would happen, especially when I was his assistant. He would call me and he would say, hey, look, this came up between this, and this person, and there would be paper that are way above my pay scale, right? And he would say, what do you think?
He did take advice.
What's your advice on this? When he ran into a technical issue in the Bible stuff, because he knew that I had a love for Bible languages, and he would call me and he would say, James, this is what I'm thinking to teach. Am I in error here? And I would just tell him, I would say, yeah, this is not correct. This is why, and blah, blah. And we would just go round and round and round about stuff. And he would send me the harder book reviews to do when there were, I don't know what it was, but when there were big name pastors that would be fighting amongst each other, they would call Jeff and ask Jeff to be the ref, right? So Jeff would call me and he would say, this is a technical issue they're arguing about. Do the homework and let me know, right?
Jeff had among the pastors I think what you call a goat element today. I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was the one who, okay, we have an argument. Okay, if we're not, we have an issue we have to deal with, and Jeff was the no nonsense.
100%, 100%, and he was very much that way. So anyway, so then what happens is we grow. I grow, and God blesses me in ways. And Jeff would tell me this. Jeff would say, James, I've watched God bless you in ways that I'm never going to get to experience in the media realm, in this and that. And people oftentimes will tell me, like, James, there's so much that you have like grown in and advanced in. And here's the thing, because I want to say this, because I think like this is really important, right? Even there was a point in time when I was on staff at Calvary Chapel Downey, when somebody said, who's the language guy in this? Or who's the smarter Bible guy? People would come to me, they would say, go to James. Jeff would say, go to James. But here's the one thing that I can tell you that is really important that will never be taken away from Jeff. I used to watch people criticize Jeff. I used to watch people say, his memory isn't as sharp. His body's weakening. I would hear all kinds of statements about Jeff. And I can tell you this right now. I can tell you that no matter how smart I ever become, no matter how wise I become, no matter how large of a church my church grows into, no matter how big my audience is, No matter what happens, I could have half the world watching me every single day, and Jeff be with the Lord for 10 years. He'll always be my pastor. And here's the funny thing, and I want people to understand this. He continues to teach me. And I'm not just saying that because I have to say something nice about somebody. You can go find Bible studies that I have taught throughout the years where I continue to tell people, Jeff will always be my pastor, and I will always learn from him. Because the Spirit of the Lord did a work in that man's life that is impossible to replicate. It's impossible.
So before we forget, I want to do two things here since we are talking about this. One, Jeff has a, arrangements of teachings called Sound Doctrine.
Oh, yeah, that's his ministry, Sound Doctrine
and
Radio.
that was his ministry on the radio, and we're putting all of that together.
Good.
And
we're gonna grow it.
I'm going to say something. Yes, we need to let the people know that this is a way to connect to Jeff's legacy as a Bible teacher, which he was definitely one of the most important Bible teachers in the realm that we're talking about.
We are going to do that. That's not, and I don't, look, my feeling on this, I do not believe that God has given me the things that I have in media just to sit here and do this. I think he's done it to be able to do stuff like that.
So let's get the sound doctrine in people's minds now, and we'll start seeing how. And think about this. Let's. I mean, if the Bible is eternal, then Jeff's teaching are as relevant today as they were 30 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it might be a time for us to kind of turn or close the loop on this. So that's one thing I want to connect, mention in connection with Jeff Johnson. The other is Gijón Springs.
Yep, it's a great ministry,
and it's a ministry that Jeff and Karen Johnson actually created after he passed on the church, and now after he's passed away, Karen is running this ministry in his memory, and we're going to be connecting to that. And again, this is part of Jeff's legacy, so we want to kind of push that out.
Yeah, we'll
as
grow
much
that.
as possible.
That's going to. We'll make sure that all that works. And I'll just tell you. I mean, I'll make it really really clear. I have always appreciated the Johnsons. Pastor Jeff is a very very special man, and he's somebody that I absolutely love. And the reality of it is that the years that God gave me with him, including to the very last, I think the last time I got to speak to him and pray with him was, I think 4 days before he went to go be with the Lord. I will just tell you that he always has and always will mean something to me, and that's never going to change. And I think that there's something to be said, right, about a person that can be there in your life from the very beginning that you come to know the Lord and never leave your heart from being in that same place. That's rare. And I'll tell you why that's rare. Because I personally don't know that I can think of anybody who was with me from day one as a senior pastor in this church, right? Who has stayed with me through and through. Now, don't get me wrong. There's lots of people that I can identify now that I think they'll always be influenced and grow, that kind of a thing. But to think about the idea that over 31 years ago, I hear a message that he gives and that impacts my heart, and it solidifies all the foundation my mother and father gave me and the heritage of my grandparents. I come to know the Lord, right? I seek him, and I grow. There's something to be said about the fact that doesn't change over the next 31 years. And we've had some drag out arguments that I thought we're going to go to blows at times.
I know about some.
I mean, we've had some nasty ones, me and him, right? But that never took away from who he was to me, and I believe who I've always been to him. And you know that. I mean, look, you saw it the last time that he was here at church, I think a few months ago, and we were just sitting down and breaking bread together. It was like nothing changed. Because that's just the way it is. And that's a testimony to the kind of ministry that guy has. And I'll always be able to say that he was a faithful pastor. And I hear these stories that guys like Jeff, I hear all these stories that people tell me about Chuck and how Chuck in many ways was a huge impact to them. But Chuck, I can promise you this. I'll make you this very promise. Chuck was never as personal to all of these other pastors as Jeff was to me. And I think you could say that about a lot of the Calvary guys that came under Chuck. They started discipling guys more than Chuck did. Now, mind you, Chuck had a lot of people under him, and there was a lot of work that he had to do, and he was a fantastic man. I mean, come on, we all know that. But I will have to give Jeff credit. He did a lot.
So there is going to be a memorial, and keep in touch here, and
we'll keep you up to speed on that.
We'll keep you up to speed because,
Yep.
if you are in the Downey area, this would probably be something to connect to and attend to, and yeah, he's going to be. We say in Hebrew, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be blessed.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think it is.
I've been reading that a lot, by the way, on these IDF soldier.
Yeah. Zal.
Yeah.
We actually abbreviate. I don't know if you know in Hebrew we abbreviate things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's too many Zal right now.
You see it, right? IDF publishes their picture, and you see that right there, that abbreviation.
I think we lost something like 250 soldiers in the fighting.
In the fighting since they've gone into Rafah?
Yeah, no, in the fighting since the beginning.
Oh, I thought that number was a lot more than that.
No, there were a lot that were lost in the first couple of days.
Yeah.
So October 7th was a lot of the victims were soldiers. So the overall number of soldiers would be probably close to 600.
600. Yeah.
But the ones lost in the fighting were like that. But here's the thing: we're getting close. I mean, they've got the news around Rafah. According to what we're understanding, Sinwar is incapacitated. There were, how do you say, stories coming out right now that he's got pneumonia, that he's kind of fluctuating, that the Hamas leadership is can't talk to him, can't reach him. He's so deep in a rabbit hole that we can't even get to him.
Yep.
And so the head of Hamas is either going to be caught or made non-relevant. We're on the verge of finishing off in Khan Yunis, and I don't know if you know, but turns out that the last of the Khan Yunis brigades find themselves inside the hospitals, and they've been using the hospital as a base to attack.
Yep.
We found cars that were stolen on the 9th of October in one of the hospital parking lots. I mean, things like that. And this is kind of getting close to a different stage.
Can you talk about what's going on in the South a little bit?
Yep. We could go. Okay, so here's the thing. The last city, the last bastion, the last area that's in control of Hamas right now is the city of Rafah, which is on the border with Egypt, literally on the edge. There are probably about 1 million or 1.3 million people who have run away from the fighting that have kind of concentrated there. We know that the Hamas leadership is there, and we know that is the last of the Hamas actually functioning military power. There's one regiment, one regiment of Hamas fighters still in Rafah, and Israel is about to go in there and finish them off. The problem is the world is all upset and all worried about that. The United States of America is worried about the humanitarian issue. Egypt is worried about them spreading out of Gaza into the Sinai, into Egyptian-held territory. Okay, but Israel actually is saying we need to finish it off, and I'm going to make something very, very clear. The Hamas does not want a ceasefire; it wants to survive.
We know that.
Okay, so Israel has put a ceasefire on the table. Basically, give us our hostages back, and we will go into a ceasefire. But Hamas has refused it. So let's make this clear. When they say that Hamas wants a ceasefire, and there's going to be a foxtail about that in probably somewhere today or tomorrow. When Hamas says they want a ceasefire, they don't want a ceasefire. They want to survive. They don't care about their people. They don't care about who's dying, who's not dying. By the way, we found out that the numbers that the Hamas and the PLO, the Palestinians are spreading are much, much too high. But that's the situation right now, and it's on this kind of a hold situation until Israel presses the last button. There is still an argument about what's going to happen on the day after, and I'm going to say I'm kind of worried about the fact that your government is pushing for a Palestinian state is in how would I say, as a reward for what the Hamas did, and that's
It's
an issue.
it's a I think it's like really, really important to understand that we are cursing ourselves. The United States of America is we are done. We are just destroying ourselves because of what happened and our stand on it. And then I think that we should talk about what happened on Thursday. What with us? For those of you that don't know what happened, I got an invite to be a part of a pastoral delegation, right? And I think that it is like it was a really, really important thing. And that was actually through Jack Hibbs. Jack was the one that kind of organized this with the state of Israel. And anyway, we basically were asked to do something that I kind of regret doing, to be honest with you. The reason why I did it was because I knew that would be something you would want to do, and it was important for a lot of reasons, right? But we basically were asked to go to a location in LA and sit down with the Consul General of Israel and some very, very key large influencers, right? And watch the classified, highly classified, by the way, videos of Israeli citizens, let's be more specific, Jews, getting murdered on October 7th. Yep. We watched 139 out of the 1,300 murders take place in front of us in high resolution living color.
What's important about that is that the footage came off of their GoPros. They were wearing GoPros. They were wearing cameras off their cell phones. They were actually documenting what they did
and excited about it.
Excited off CCTVs that were kind of spread along the area. In front of the front gate of one of the kibbutzim, and it was. And they kept on stressing it. It wasn't Israeli footage. It wasn't something that we put together. It is something that they published literally on the Hamas Telegram channels and YouTube channels. And you see what actually happened. What I'm trying to say is it was very realistic. It was very harsh. It was very in your gut. More than anything else. It was very hard to watch.
Yeah.
47 minutes. And we saw a lot of people die. We saw the disrespect for life. And the disdain for life on a I'm going to say the most evil way possible, and
I know which two bothered you the most. I could because I know you. I could read it like a book. I didn't even have to ask you, and we haven't even discussed it. But I guarantee you, I know which two bothered you the absolute most. Let's see if I'm right. Okay. The first one, and it was probably one of the ones that bothered me the most, was the scene where they go into Gaza City. And how many thousands of people were not only joyful in the idea that Jews would be murdered, but were participating in it when they brought one out to do that, and to see the demonic chanting as they're saying Allahu Akbar, and the parents telling their kids to step on that person's head.
They're
So that was the one, and the other one was the kid getting pulled out of the tank. I think those two. Was I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
Well, the one with the officer, though.
Oh yeah, that was
that was off
tremendously terrible.
But let's start off with two things. The second one is easier for me to kind of explain because I am a tank commander. I've been on the Gaza border many times. I actually recognize the place where that tank was burning, and I know. And what shook me, I guess, would be the way is when they pulled the body of one of the tank people out of the tank. When a body is alive, it's stiff. You know, it kind of
Yep.
pushes up against something. When somebody dies, it becomes not stiff, and just to see them kind of pulled off and bouncing off the turret onto the hull, off the hull onto the ground, and jumping up and down and just enjoying that. Now, there's two things that kind of pushed against me. How did that happen? A tank is an armored vehicle, and the whole idea is that you are inside and you keep the danger, the enemy, outside. And what they did is they managed to get through that armor, through that defense. And if you manage to drop a hand grenade inside inside the tank, if you manage to overcome the outer shell and you're inside, then it's a killing zone. And that is crazy. I had actually talked to somebody that was in my unit in the past. We were in reserves together, who was there on that tank that you saw in the movie the day that it happened, meaning that evening. He was pulled in. He's part of an armored forensic investigating unit, and he was there, and he told me some of the stories about that. And
So you were aware of the backstory of all that.
oh yeah, and how it got there, and how that tank got there, and what exactly happened. So that was one.
How do they?
Well, if the hatch is open, you drop a hand grenade inside.
Oh.
You kind of, that's it. I mean, there's nothing much to do. They had the thing. They again, a lot of planning and a lot of preparation went into this. They knew what they were doing. They were planning this. You can climb up the back of a tank and drop something inside if the hatch is open. On the other hand, if the hatches are closed, then it's another thing. So again, we were caught unprepared,
Yeah.
open hatched, and that is part of the thing. So that's one. But as terrible as something is, okay, I don't know. You have a mass murder running around L.A. killing people. Okay, what was scary for me is that when you see that it's not a mass murder running around killing people, or it's not even a crime gang, it's not even what do you call one of your Crips or whatever that's going on a killing spree. It is like the whole population of whatever of a town that actually send their young men out to do this in their name. And that's what we saw in Gaza. It wasn't like the Hamas was actually pulling off this event. It's not like one gang goes into the territory of another gang and kills the people. They were sent by the people waiting in Gaza and celebrating what happened. And when they brought the bodies, literally the broken, unnatural posed legs and limbs on these bodies in the back of pickup trucks, the people who had sent the Hamas fighters to do this lined the streets, and they didn't have ticker tape, but they had everything else but the ticker tape, waiting for these bodies to be shown as they came back through. And what I'm trying to say is, you realize it wasn't crazy people doing crazy things somewhere. It is a society that sent these young men in their name to perpetrate this and celebrated their success.
They were handing candy out to each other while they're watching another human being get stomped on. They were celebrating it.
No, one of the things that kind of struck me terrible was, and again, there's the whole scene about the father, defending his kids, okay? And on the other side in Gaza, you see a father holding up a baby, I don't know, 2-year-old baby, holding him up and saying, look,
Yeah.
look what's here. I want you to see this. That scared me in a deeper way. And James, you know my background. You've heard my story.
Yep.
I've been in combat, and I'm not. How do you say? I know what death is. I know what death is up close and personal. I know where human beings become something else because of that. I've been there. I've seen it. I've done it. I've got it all. But you know my story, and maybe in a nutshell, because anybody who's been on the tour with me knows what I'm talking about, is that when I killed my first human beings, and again, combat, tank against tank, and I took out a Syrian tank, and for a while, because it's far off and it's like on the screen, I was all excited about it because it's technical, it's complex, and there's a professionalism in fighting war. I mean, we are professionals. The Army is very professional, and I remember feeling excited about it. Look what we did. I mean, we pulled it off. And again, anybody who's been in a complex kind of organization like that knows what I'm talking about. It was 2 days later when I realized that as complex it is and as professional we were and as well we had done it, that we had killed human beings, and my soul screamed out.
Yeah.
And for a long time, with me, I couldn't. And now again, I didn't do it personal. I mean, it's not like I put my head against my gun against somebody's head. I was, in a combat situation with other combat units. I mean, according to all the rules and regulations. But again, when I realized that I had been excited about what I did, it blew my soul apart.
Yeah.
And I cannot understand how 1,000, probably about 1,800 or 2,000 Hamas people did what they did, which is much worse than I did, and it didn't blow them away. It didn't impact their souls. I mean, it took me 3 days of vomiting and years of
Yeah.
self-reflection to deal with the fact, not of what I had done, and I'm going to say this again, not of what I had done, to deal with the fact that I had enjoyed it, and I saw exactly the opposite in the people that perpetrated this.
Yeah, I think
that how do you say, sent a shiver through my soul.
Yeah, but I think the fact that you have to look at it this way. The fact that you enjoyed it and you articulated this well 15 years ago or 10 years ago, the first time I ever heard you talk about this. You're in Lebanon. You've never participated in the type of higher level combat with tanks prior to this point. You have a lot of training under your belt. There's a series of very critical positions that you're in. You know that in the North, the people in the North cannot afford to have you make a mistake. It's radical combat that's going on. These are the people that Hussein in Jordan swished away, who are very, very mad and utilizing their advantage with the help of Russia and a whole bunch of other people to gain position in not just in the south, but potentially in Beirut. You do what you were trained to do.
Yeah.
And I still remember this like it was yesterday, because here's something you didn't tell everybody, but I remember this from the very first time you told the story. You destroy a tank, you're excited about the idea that you prevailed in that, and it was a close situation. It wasn't like it was a it was a very scary situation, right? But what I remember more than anything is you telling me how you were excited, the adrenaline, you rejoiced, it was a good thing. And then 2 days later, there was a very specific thought you shared having. And you don't talk about it a lot, but I remember you talking about this when you shared it with the group. And actually, no, I actually think this was me and you personally. But the thought that you had, and I'll never forget it, was every single person in that tank, and I believe the tank that you took down had 3 people in that tank. Oh, 4 people in that tank. Every single person in that tank had children and were married. And you immediately started thinking about their children. You started thinking about their wife. You started thinking about the family that they have, the town that they came from, all of the familial connections, the social connections, the life that they were living. And then it became devastating to you. That's what a healthy mind looks like.
Okay, I'll stress it and kind of explain. I repersonalized them.
Yeah?
They turned back into people.
Yeah, but you have to do that. If you're gonna keep yourself to a place where you don't become like these animals, you have to think about it in those terms. And by the way, let me just tell you this right now. These people that we saw, savage animals are better than them. They're not savage animals. These people were empty shells that were possessed by demons. Every single one of them were demon possessed. You could see it. They were possessed with the devil.
And that was as scary as it itself. And again, the Balagan connection that we're putting up today is talking about this. But here's something else, and I think most of our listeners and watchers would understand. When you read the story of Jesus' crucifixion, and you read the account from Matthew, one of the things that happens leading up to the actual crucifixion, to the actual event, was the soldiers mocking Jesus and playing with him. And I couldn't help make the connection between Jesus being mocked. Again, this is the Son of God. This is, what needs to happen. But the fact that they mocked and they ridiculed him in some way made it even worse. Made what they were doing even worse. I mean, okay, this is going to happen. But the fact that you take pride in it, and again, my personal experience in southern Lebanon wasn't the fact that I had killed people. I can come to terms with the fact that I can kill. I need to kill. Sometimes you
have
need
to. There's
kill.
no way that you're right. Yeah, that's understandable.
What made me feel like a despicable human being was the fact that I had enjoyed it. And that, I think, is the difference. And that's what chilled my blood watching this 47 minutes of footage, is that in no way, no place, no time did you see them going through this, wait a minute, we shouldn't be enjoying this. That means something very deep has broken. And I've been to Yad Vashem many times, and people ask me, how did the Nazis do this? And what I tend to explain, and this is not me, I heard it from a Nazi survivor, a Holocaust survivor once. He said, one of the basic aspects that God has given us as human beings is empathy. Empathy is the ability to empathize with somebody else, to feel somebody else's feelings.
Yep.
In order for somebody to do what the Nazis did in the Holocaust, or what these animals, for lack of a better word, did in 9th of October, the empathy has to be broken. You have to disassociate them, the ability for them to see their victims as human beings. My empathy was broken for a little while, and I reconnected it, and it tore my soul apart that it had been broken for a little while. Their empathy, and I'm going to say this, the fact that we watched it happening in Gaza, not with the perpetrators themselves, but with their uncles, their cousins, and the great majority of the people there, meaning that empathy there has broken on a cultural, social level.
Mm-hmm.
And that had me scared more than anything else.
Yeah, I man, that's such a great, you're articulating that perfectly. And I think that I understand why the nation of Israel, or the state of Israel, if we use modern day terminology, refuses to show this to the whole world, these videos, because you don't want the victims or the families of the victims to relive it. And we're talking about an active crime scene, that there's still an active criminal investigation. But my goodness, bro, the part that bothers me the most about this was I was overwhelmed with a thought that says, why don't they show this to the whole world and then carpet bomb Gaza? And then I just realized something. This is spiritual. And if they showed this to the whole world, half the world would say, good for them.
Well, I want to add something else that, when we ask why didn't they show, and there are other things that they could have shown that they didn't. Part of it is the families.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and I was thinking about, the families of the people that were on some of that footage. The officer. I mean, just, and I know that they did request permission from the families of all the people all the victims that you saw on that footage. And it's like, let's say, I know it sounds, let's say your daughter is abused by a terrible person, and in the trial, they want to put a movie of that abuse up. Now, you'll understand the need to do it because you need to prove how terrible this was and how criminal he is. But on the other hand, you don't want that to be shown to the world.
That's right.
And I think as a nation, we hacked that thing coming together. And one more thing I want to kind of add here. And I've said this in Yad Vashem a couple of times. But how many people were in that theater with us, you estimate?
Maybe, I don't know.
60?
If that, not maybe 50.
60?
Maybe, yeah.
I think together with everything. That theater should have been full.
Look, I agree with you, although I will tell you that it was a little encouraging to know that virtually everybody in that theater had a massive audience.
Yes.
And that's, and you know what else was also impressive to me? Watching the Consul General.
Mm-hmm.
So the new Consul General of Israel is, he's not Jewish.
No, he's not.
He's not Jewish. He's actually Druze.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know this. He comes from, it's actually famous. We've been there together in that area. It'll come to me right now.
The village?
Daliat El Carmel.
Daliat El Carmel.
Yeah. He comes from there.
He comes from Dalia. I didn't.
He was right. He was born there.
Dalia. So anybody who's been on a tour, when we go to the Mount Carmel and do the overview where Elijah brought the fire, that's Dalia. You've probably had falafel there.
Yeah, well, we've eaten at some of the best restaurants are in that area. Actually, well, anyway, there's a little Arab village that's like right around the corner. That's the best one. But anyway, he was part of an airborne unit.
Paratrooper.
He was a paratrooper.
He said he was a paratrooper.
Yeah. And he's very serious about the nation, the state of Israel, his love for Israel, his love for the people that he serves side by side with. Look, he's clearly a blessed man. You talk to him. You talk to lots of the Arab people that view themselves as Israeli citizens and want to continue to be a part of that life. They're all blessed people.
Yes. God
has blessed them immensely.
On the whole.
In more ways than you can possibly imagine.
And let's maybe tie in a couple more things. He is an official representative of the state of Israel, and he's not Arab.
He's not Arab.
Not Jewish.
Yeah, he's not Jewish. I guess the Druze, they're considered. I know they're not. They don't consider themselves to be Arabs.
I'm going to say this,
even though he speaks perfect Arabic, by the way.
Well, ethnically, I think they come from the Middle East.
Yeah.
The religion is the way I tend to explain the Druze religion. The Druze religion for Islam is like Mormonism is for Christianity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they kind of went off in
Islam.
It's a really way out there offshoot of Islam.
Yeah.
But they were terribly persecuted by the Muslims down through the ages, and the only place that they have thrived is under Jewish sovereignty.
And you want to hear something really interesting? When he speaks Arabic, by the way, his Arabic is perfect. When he speaks Arabic, the terms that he uses for God, he does, unlike most Arabic speakers and people from from Arab countries, he doesn't intermix the word that people use for God in Christian circles with the word that people use for Allah in the Islamic circles. His vocabulary is very refined.
Interesting.
It's like he kind of impressed me when I talked to him. But anyway, it behooves people to support Israel because there's a blessing that comes from it. And I just don't know why people don't see that.
But here's the thing. He is living, walking, talking proof that there's no apartheid.
Oh yeah, are you kidding me?
I mean,
dude, if you're Druze, if you're Arab, if you're any one of these, what they would consider to be minorities in all of that, Israel is the place you go to survive and grow. How many Arabs in Gaza in 1948? 100,000 maybe?
But again, here we're
and now 2.2 million?
Yeah. But we're going back to, people say genocide, but there's no genocide. People say apartheid, but there's no apartheid. It doesn't really matter because the war, and again, let's tie this back to the people in Gaza cheering. The war is not about what the truth is. The war is what people actually esteem. And you've got a whole generation. I just now heard a statistic the other day that of the 14,000 UNRWA workers, meaning the workers of the United Nations Relief and whatever, the United
Which is a
Nations
terrorist organization.
Well, here's the thing.
They're a terrorist
They have
organization.
14,000 employees in the Gaza Strip. Okay, out of that, something like 2,000 were actual Hamas members. Okay, another 5,000 had first connection family members that were Hamas members.
Yeah,
meaning 7,000 people in UNRWA in Gaza have Hamas ties.
UNRWA is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, but we're paying for it.
It's ridiculous. Well, come on, we were paying for Hamas.
Yeah, among others.
Come on, let's get. How about we get real?
But again, what scared me is the triumph, the jubilation of the people in the street, not only these drugged up perpetrators, and that's something that we have to kind of connect to, and maybe that'll kind of, what do you say, segue into the next subject that we're talking about.
That's great. Yeah, let's get into this. This is an interesting story. This story is entitled "Russia's Worrisome Invite to Hamas, PIJ, and its implications." Okay, so I'm going to read this in just a second. Let me do this really quickly before we switch over to this subject, because it is a very important subject, I think, for us to get into. But let me read some of these super chats that came in, because I do appreciate them. Brad Brunn, you say, eschatology, when taught biblically, emphasizes an urgency to impact our sphere of influence with the gospel of Jesus Christ and allow his light to shine through us. Thank you, Brother James, for always reminding us of this. Brad, you're one of us, bro. That's all I have to say. Well done, my brother. That's very well put. And I wish that there were even some Calvary guys that would recognize that. And then Chava 2K, I love this. This is actually what made me want to read these right now. You say what happened is totally demonic. The West doesn't understand the depth of depravity. Israel shows such tremendous restraint, and the families of victims and the hostages should always be in our prayers. Amen. Look, we have people in our audience that say the most insane, crazy things. And it's not a lot of them. That's not the majority of them. But when I read comments like this from our audience, it makes me so proud. So proud of the listeners that we have, because you are right. And thank you for your support, you guys. That goes a long way.
I'm going to say this. When I see comments like that from the listeners, I'm proud to be an Israeli.
Amen. Amen.
I am proud to be an Israeli. But it's getting harder, and here it comes. I mean, ooh. What's the Bible verse that says, when my enemies sit together and plot against me?
Oh, yeah. Bro, let me read this. Let me read the first paragraph of this, and this gets really ugly. We're going to do some analysis on this. I'm actually going to record a video on this story today. I'll probably release it Saturday, but we're going to do some analysis on this because I have a lot to say about the biblical implications of this, and we'll talk about it right now. So this is what it says. It says, Russia has invited Palestinian groups to Moscow, which could bring together Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and other terrorist groups, right? And by the way, I thought we were done with the discussions of utilizing Islamic Jihad in any context, but not so much, right? Let me read this paragraph. It says this. It says, Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya, and I'm saying that wrong on purpose because it sounds so much like shaitan. We'll leave it there. Said over the weekend that Russia, some of you know what I'm talking about when I say that, it's the Arabic word for Satan, said over the weekend that Russia invited Palestinian factions to meet in Moscow at some point in late February, the latest Russian move to increase its influence in a post-October 7th world. I think that's right. It is a serious attempt to increase the influence. Now, look, I'm not so crazy about the Jerusalem Post. I think that some of the things that they write tends to be emphatically more leftist leaning.
Yep.
But a lot of these stories have been closer to at least the center now since October the 7th.
Yeah. Well, by the way, all of Israeli society has moved way over.
Oh, yeah. I just watched, I sent an email to him because I hear he's in the States. And I hope he's near California. If he is, we're going to get him over here. David TaL is in America right now. So I'm hoping that I just sent him an email. Hopefully we'll get him over here because I watched an interview that he did specifically on this subject, talking about how all of Israel is unifying in this area.
Yep.
Right. Even some of the dum-dums in the Hebrew University that have lost their minds.
Well, we got some wackos in our government too. I mean, you don't have a monopoly of wackoism in your government. We got some.
Oh no, we have. Yeah, yes. I think ours probably beat the. Win the race because I still think that there's people in your government that don't believe that men can get pregnant.
No, I don't think anybody.
Yeah, we have that here. I mean, can you imagine having somebody run your government that doesn't know the difference between a boy and a girl? Speaking of which, I will say this, and it kind of impressed me. The very first time I ever heard Sheila Jackson talking in the context of what she does as a Supreme Court judge, she kind of impressed me. It was actually very smart.
I'm not sure I know who she is. Tell me.
She's one of our Supreme Court justices.
Okay.
When her confirmation hearing went down, she was asked, "What is a woman?" And she said, "I can't answer that question."
Oh, that went viral. I saw that video.
Oh yeah, completely woke lady. But I was very impressed with the Supreme Court case that they're running right now. It was one of the Trump issues, really dealing with the constitutionality of a state, specifically Colorado, being able to take him off the ballot. And some of the arguments that that the lawyers were giving were relatively good, but some of the pushback that the justices were doing, Clarence Thomas, of course, was the one that impressed me the most. He did the best in the pushback. And I'm like, thank you, God, that we have him on the bench. But Sheila Jackson actually did very well. And that surprises me because for a person who doesn't know whether or not doesn't know how to identify a woman.
Well, that means she doesn't know if she's a woman.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so that's the crazy world that we live in. But
so why are, okay, just.
So let me read this.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me read this. So it says, it's my fault for interrupting. Okay, Moscow hosted a Hamas delegation already in October as Hamas sought to do outreach to Moscow. In October, a Hamas delegation set out for Moscow, led by senior Hamas member Musa Abu Malzouk, which, by the way, is a surprise to me, but there's a lot of reasons why that surprises me.
What, Musa Abu Malzouk?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why that surprises me, because I am shocked seeing somebody like him actually be willing to leave anywhere outside of where he has been near the Persian Gulf because of his fear of assassination.
Well, they all have big crosshairs.
Oh, yeah, all of them. And but that's a whole other story. Okay, so they met with Russian and here we go, bingo, right? Iranian deputy foreign ministers, Mikhail Bogdanov and Ali. I think this is Ali Bakhri Khani, as I think how you would pronounce it, because he's a Shiite, he's Iran. That's probably how you pronounce it. Anyway,
Farsi.
Yeah. Okay, that meeting represented a convening of interest between Russia, Iran, and Hamas. This is concerning because Iran backs Hamas and also supplies Russia with drones for its use in the war in Ukraine. Russia has been particularly cold towards Israel following October 7th, slamming its operations in Gaza, and particularly Israel's ambassador to Russia in early February. Okay, where do we want to start with this? Do we want to start with Russia's attitude towards...
How deep down the rabbit hole you want to go on this?
Well, we could go down a bit of a rabbit hole, because the question is where do we start? I mean, look, we have to have a discussion right away about one part of this article, and this goes along, this goes on and on and on, and I'll spend some time analyzing it later on for a video, but, and it's not an incorrect statement, right? Russia has been very coldly approaching the subject of Israel since October the 7th. They've been very, I'm not going to say cold, they've been very silent, very hands-offish in many ways.
Yeah. Okay. So back up a little bit. Let's see if we can kind of connect a couple of things. First of all, Middle East is a free-for-all. After the fall of, after the Arab Spring, everything kind of breaks up. The Arab world has realized that democracy doesn't work in a Muslim environment. So a lot of things have been going on. One of the main aspects is a key nation that actually, how do I say, straddles the Mediterranean, which is the western part of the Middle East,
right,
and Iraq on the other side, called Syria, completely disintegrated, fell apart, and in the holes in the vacuum, the power vacuums that were created inside Syria, that's where ISIS came to breed. That's where the Turks started messing their hands inside. That's where the Saudis started playing on all out. It becomes a wild Syria.
Yep.
And that's where Russia set up shop. The Russians have had a strong influence and a strong backing inside Syria. And that, I think, to a certain extent, is the backdrop of what we're seeing right now. Two things to remember what we're talking about. We know that the KGB created the Palestine Liberation Organization, the whole Arab Palestinian nationalism, and they did it in order to destabilize the Middle East as part of the Cold War of theirs against the West. So what we're seeing now is this. Russia is back at its own game, okay? They're saying we are in a bigger war against the West. One way in order to create an environment that is good for us is by destabilizing as much as we can in the Middle East. Now let's go to the other side. There's two kinds of Muslims. We know about Sunni and we know about Shiites.
Yep.
Really interesting. They don't get along with each other. And one of the things that Israel has said over the years is we're very lucky that our enemies are so fragmented. They hate each other more than they hate us. Okay? The Sunnis hate the Shiites. There's a Cold War going on in the Middle East between the Sunnis, who are basically backed by and influenced by Saudi Arabia, and the Shiites that are actually proxies. Most of the Shiites are basically proxies of Iran. And what Iran has managed to do, for instance, with the Hamas, is bridge that gap. Iran is Shiite, Hamas is Sunni, Muslim Brotherhood. And we used to think that they're never going to get along with each other. It turns out that they get along with each other very well.
Yeah.
Okay? And even inside the Palestinian organizations, okay, there's a deep hate between the Hamas, which is fundamentalist Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian Authority, which the PLO, which turned into the Palestinian Authority, that literally shoot each other on the streets when they can.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm trying to say is the splintered factions of the Arab world were really important for Israel, because that means the world can't come together. One of the reasons, and maybe this is what we need to talk about next time, Ramadan is coming up.
Oh, boy.
And Ramadan is going to be centered on the Temple Mount. And the Temple Mount is the one unifying factor that would bring all of the world, Shiite and Sunni, together. And that's something that we need to deal with. And I'm going to give you a teaser for what we talk about next time. What's the original name of the Temple Mount, where the temple is? Mount Moriah.
Moriah. Yeah.
And Moriah.
It took me a second to process. Yeah, Moriah.
Moriah. And it's not by chance that the most sensitive place in the world, Middle East, is a place that in Hebrew actually means God's classroom.
It's funny. Isn't
Okay,
that funny?
that's not funny at all. I mean, these are the connections that need to be made. So we've got this all coming together right now. And what Russia is trying to do is saying this. We will be the unifying factor that's going to bring all the different Palestinian aspects together in order to give them much more political and military weight than they do as factions. And if we can pull this together, we will have influence in the Middle East, and we will be a destabilizing factor to Western influence inside the Middle East. And who's going to help them with that? The other destabilizing factor, and that's Iran.
Okay, how about I throw a wrench in the spokes?
Well, go prophetic and biblical on me on this one,
Yeah, that's where I'm going to go.
please.
I'm gonna throw a wrench in the spokes because I think that everything you're saying is 100% correct, but I think it's going to get crazier than that. Okay, we have to back up first of all before we get into the Bible side of this. Well, the Bible side of this is what drives this line of thinking, right?
Yeah.
The Ezekiel 38 side of things. Okay, we have to go back to October 7th, and then shortly thereafter, we ask the question: why on God's green earth did we send 2 carrier groups into the Mediterranean? We don't do that. We don't send carrier groups to the Mediterranean. Anytime we send a carrier group anywhere in that region, one time, and it almost started a massive war, we did it in the Black Sea or near the Black Sea, Caspian, I believe. And then the other time we did it, and actually very few people knew about that, by the way. And then the other time that we did it, right, we used to do it all the time, and that was because of what happened originally with Operation Desert Storm, when we had the situation with Kuwait and Iraq and everything that happened there, and we established a very large presence in the Persian Gulf, okay? And by the way, that's what actually created the current DMZs that exist in certain parts of the Indian Ocean, right? Is because of our regular presence in the Persian Gulf. I would bet my life on the fact that the president of the United States, or his handlers, let's just say that, his handlers, right, put those out there, literally, thank you, put those out there. You want some more coffee, by the way?
No.
Okay. Put those out there in order to reclaim some lost ground that they gave up through the current State Department with respect to the Mideast.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because they're watching the aggressive movement of Russia being directly supported and bolstered by the positions they have already established in the Mideast. Everybody forgets about the big summit that happened between President Biden and President Putin, where they both got together, and Putin basically, Biden told Putin, you have our permission to go ahead and build the Nord Stream, finish the Nord Stream that the former president didn't allow you to finish. So go ahead and do it. And Putin said, in exchange, I will get my head around calming down what is happening in Syria, and I will get Iran under control. The United States of America, because of the land bridge argument, right? If you remember the whole land bridge discussion, because the land bridge discussion. So America was gladly in the position of obliging to Putin. And then it was shortly thereafter that Kamala Harris goes in their region, and I'll talk about this with Tom Hughes tomorrow, goes in the region and literally, like a bumbling idiot, tells Zelensky, hey, we would love to have you join NATO. Forget the discussion of the expansion of NATO. Putin has said, I don't want NATO to expand because I'm concerned predominantly around affecting my security interests, especially in the south and Crimea. So she says, come on, let's do this. And then Putin issues an immediate warning to the international community. And he says, NATO, you better off yourself or I'm going to off you. And NATO basically says, you can shove it. because we have the United States of America backing our play. And then what begins to happen is Putin says, okay, no problem. I'm going to strengthen my position in the Mideast before I aggressively pursue Ukraine. So before he set himself up anywhere near Poland, before he moved anybody into Belarus, which we saw coming, before he rerouted some of the components of the pipeline that he had finished building immediately after the president gave him the go-ahead, before he did any of that, he started establishing serious alliances in the Middle East. He joined the larger portion of the faction in the civil war in Libya. He did that, by the way, believe it or not, with the blessing of Bennett in Israel.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if you remember, the current foreign minister, who's a man that I actually interviewed personally, and he's a friend, at least an acquaintance, and someone that we have a mutual respect for one another, right? When Israel Katz started in on Libya to bring in normalization, because that was literally on the verge of happening, right?
We were there.
When that started happening, Putin's influence in that picture damaged that, and Israel allowed that to happen on purpose at the hands of Bennett. Bennett did that, right? And he did that just for one reason and one reason only. It's a I hate Bibi play.
Yeah, it's anti-Bibi.
Yeah, I hate Likud and Israel Katz. Look, I'm going to just tell you this right now. If Bibi was gone, Israel Katz probably would have been the leader of the Likud for a while. Mm-hmm. He would have been the prime minister, and I think he would have been a very strong prime minister. But I'm just going to say this. All of that got ruined by Russia, and the very moment that happened, when Bennett told Russia, "Yes, I'm with you on this," Russia got given the keys of the kingdom because their foot was made strong in Libya. Their position on Iran became a gatekeeper that held everything back. Their footing with Egypt was strong because a lot of people don't know this and they probably won't understand it. But Putin had a large hand in helping El-Sisi remove Islamic Brotherhood, at least the dominant presence of Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt, right?
Okay.
And then you take that and you line that up with Erdogan in Turkey actually beginning to cooperate right now with Syria as a result of the earthquakes that happened and the movement of weapons that took place as a result of that from Iran into the region up north, right? You begin to have a certain alliance that Putin has that by the time October 7th happened, everybody looked at the conglomerate of nations that Putin had an influence in and went, oh my gosh, this is bad.
But why this? Why this and why now?
I'll tell you why, because it makes perfect sense to me, right? We are quickly destabilizing as a result of these Islamic movements, at least in that region, right? Not because of what they're doing per se, but because of the constant hammering that Israel is getting to stop whatever they're calling an incursionary movement into Gaza. And the more involved Israel gets in eliminating a group like Hamas, the more likely we are and the closer we get to Hezbollah being the next group of people that we deal with. Beirut would probably love for that to happen, okay, because of the economic woes that are taking place. But you got to keep this in mind. The moment Israel begins to engage with Hezbollah after destroying Hamas, you have a bigger problem at hand. And the bigger problem is Lebanon, first of all. You have potentially a repeat of 1982 in a very different way, right? It's going to become very serious. And then on top of that, you have a bigger problem with Syria and everything that connects to the north of that.
Okay.
So Putin, Putin is wanting to be the father at the table. Putin wants to bring them all in and basically say, you guys are done. You guys, listen, I know Israel and I have a relationship with Israel and I know what's going on. And I don't know if he's going to put it quite this way, but what I do know is he's going to do everything that he can to reel in what he's seeing going on and not even establish a two-state solution, but rather quell the fire so that the position that Israel gets put in is one where they can continue to function without being in the kind of limelight that exists. Because think about it like this, right? Putin, if I'm Putin, okay, and on the outside of Putin, I know what the Bible says about what Russia's going to do and so on and so forth. This is what I would do if I was Putin. If I was Putin, I would take great advantage of the fact that the world disdains me, at least the Western world. I would take advantage of the fact that the Western world disdains me and at the same time sympathizes to a large degree with the people that I'm reaching out to. So then what I would do is I would reach out to those people, understanding and knowing full well that interaction with those people is the ticket that large Western nations are using right now to try to get back into Russia. Okay? We put those carriers in the Mediterranean only to position ourselves in a better way with respect to what's happening in Russia. Putin, what Putin is basically doing is he's defanging America. He's taking away any leverage that they might have on any level to participate in an aggressive fashion. What he's doing is he's making strong his existing empire.
Okay, so let's tie this together. And I'm thinking, okay, when you see something like this, you're going to say, okay, what does Russia get out of this? And one of the things,
lot.
Yeah, but one of the things I'm thinking about right now is that as of now, let's say, and this is what we've been talking about before, there is an overall agreement that the United States has been trying to push together with Saudi Arabia, with the Gulf states, you know, and one of the things that I'm afraid is that they're going to push Hamas down Israel's throat as part of a larger agreement, because Israel will not accept Hamas in the area after this, unless they come and say, okay, if you can choke on Hamas, then we will give you peace in the Middle East and everybody's going to be okay. I do believe that they're going to try to push Hamas on Israel with a big, massive bag of carrots that kind of connect to other things. But here's the thing. As of now, Russia's not in this.
Yeah, and I personally don't think that'll happen. I think Putin's too smart to let that happen.
Well, here's the thing. As of now, Russia's not on the table. But let's say that the Palestinians say, if we want to sit down and reach this great, grand agreement, okay, we want Russia in on this. What Russia is doing is buying a ticket from the Palestinians to be a part of this coming together that a lot of people are talking about that's going on in the Middle East. And let's put it this way, there is a lot of things going on under the table that we don't know about right now.
Yeah, but what you have to do in this situation, and I'm kind of surprised that you haven't made the connection yet, which I assume you probably, in your mind, you have. But what you have to do is you have to remind yourself of Russia's involvement, right, with the creation of the Palestinian state.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So remember, when the KGB created
the Palestinian
state, right?
They didn't even create the state. They created the national
Well,
movement.
you know what I mean. The fictitious state. I mean, there's no Palestinian state.
No,
but, you know,
they created the Palestinian nationality. It wasn't even a nationality.
Right, the nationality. That's right. That is a very fair statement. That's an accurate statement, okay? Arafat was already on a whole bunch of levels influenced by Marxist ideals and beliefs and all of that. The whole idea behind the nationalization of some kind of, or the creation of some kind of a Palestinian state had nothing to do with the weakening of Israel at the time.
No.
It had everything to do with the weakening of the nations that Russia believed would be the biggest problem for them as they chose to move south in being able to reestablish some kind of semblance from what was left from the former USSR.
So
right?
Russia creates this nationalist movement, not out of the greatness of their heart, but in order to be a counterbalance to Western...
Think about it like this. The USSR is in its prime at this point.
Yeah.
Okay? The USSR is everything. The biggest barriers to the expansion of the USSR south of Ukraine is going to end up being Jordan.
Yeah.
Jordan is going to be the biggest barrier. Lebanon was always going to be viewed as the incapable nation that can't be targeted because they're a bunch of weaklings.
Okay.
And they knew that if Lebanon got targeted directly by Russia, that the United States would immediately get involved and that there would be an immediate war between the two of them, because Lebanon at the time was viewed as a Christian nation and the United States of America would never allow it to happen. As a matter of fact, one of the most puzzling things to me that I think I've ever experienced in my mind is how the United States of America allowed what happened in Armenia to take place the way it did. It's still puzzling to me. And I one day I'm going to tackle that issue, because we're seeing history repeat itself with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I'll leave that be. But Russia knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that if it messed with Lebanon, right, and it messed with Jordan, it would be an immediate war with the United States of America, especially because of the interest that we had, our asset interests in the Mediterranean. There was a real concern by that. So Beirut was you don't touch Beirut. It's a hands-off thing, right? And that's why what happened in Iran with our soldiers, right, being bombed, when that whole thing happened in the 70s and the hostages and everything that happened there, that was done on purpose. When you think about what Khomeini did, that all of that was done to basically splinter up the focus of America in the region, because there was already a lot of hotbeds going on. I am convinced that Khomeini knew exactly what was going on, because he was, in one way or another, whether or not he was doing it on purpose, he was a help to the USSR. Make no mistake about it.
But now we have that connection.
Right.
That is, they're opening and okay about it.
So Putin is an old school KGB, hardcore, thinker. And I guarantee you that the utilization of these Arab populations is, in essence, to weaken not necessarily the position of the same groups of people that they were targeting back when the KGB created what they created. It had nothing to do with that. He's now doing this to weaken the position of any involvement in the future of the West, not even in the Arabian Peninsula, not even in West Africa. I don't even think he's concerned about North Africa with respect to Libya. I think his greatest, what he gains the most out of this is he strengthens the position that he has in the asset that's closest to the Golan Heights, which happens to be Syria. He strengthens that position.
Why are they getting their fingers in it now? And here's what I'm feeling.
Because because it's the leverage. If he got his fingers in it early on, there'd be no leverage.
Why? Okay. So what I'm feeling is this. Again, if we talk about this axis of resistance, Russia, Iran, okay, and then coming together, I think Russia sees Iran as dropping the ball.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, because
that's a given.
Look at this. Okay, Iran's got the Houthis, it's got the Hezbollah, it's got different proxies, it's got all of this influence, it's got the Hamas. And here's the thing, the Hamas is about to be wiped off. Hezbollah has been sidelined. Look at this. I mean, they haven't gotten into this. They haven't played a role in what's going on. Okay, and I think Russia is saying to themselves, wait a minute, we thought that this would be an axis, this would be something that would be pressure. It's too splintered right now to be a relative tool in order to achieve our goals. We will come in, we will unify, and listen to this. They're going to sit in Moscow with a group of people who yell in the streets, death to America.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, all of this. The Hamas yells death to America. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad yells death to America. The Hezbollah yells death to America. These are death to America organizations, okay? And they're going to come together under the Russian umbrella. My question is, what is the United States going to do about this?
Here's the thing you have to do before you even ask those questions. You have to ask yourself this one question. It's very important to ask because it gets missed by a lot of people. I guarantee you're not going to miss it when I bring it up, right? Who was the strongest unifier prior to Russia getting involved of these terrorist organizations? And the answer to that is really simple. The strongest unifier of those people that were associated with these, before Russia got involved, with these terrorist organizations, were men that the IDF in essence executed, or Mossad, or whatever you want to call it, right? The one that was just executed to the north, right, was probably the biggest hitter in unifying. He was in essence the bridge between Hamas and Hezbollah, okay? So here's the part that is going to be disturbing to some people, but it probably is true, right? Where did they get the intel to execute him the way that they did? I guarantee you that intel was shared in one way or another, either indirectly through proxy or directly by Russia. Guaranteed. Russia wanted to see the unifiers that were Arab die. They had to be, because how is this invite going to work?
Okay.
If they're working together.
But here's the thing. Russia has been closing an eye to Israeli involvement inside Syria, withholding back Iran influence and
But that's because of
arms-
Bennett. That's because of Bennett.
arms into Lebanon. I mean, we've been blowing up shipments of arms from Iran to the Hezbollah in Lebanon for years.
We've been doing it in Damascus for the last year.
Underneath Russian S-300
Yes.
systems and S-400 systems.
Yes, that's right. All the way, listen, all the way from the south, all up into Damascus and Aleppo, we have S-300, S-400 systems that Russia has put. They are highly sophisticated anti-aircraft systems. They are not, listen, they have shot down, no one wants to admit it, they have shot down F-35s, okay? Not a lot of them, but they have. So here's the thing. Nothing, I'm telling you, including the bombing expeditions that Israel has had on the Damascus International Airport, nothing happens in Syria without the permission or the sign-off of Russia. That relationship was established by Bennett. Let's tell the truth.
So now what's happening?
So I am guessing that Israel is quietly closing its eyes to this meeting, not objecting or not supporting.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that Putin is doing exactly what we talked about. He is wanting to be the father at the table. He's wanting to come in. Why? Because he has everything to gain from it. Look, if there's anything that's going to serve as a barrier from his operation, and just look at a map. All you have to do is look at a map. If there's anybody that's going to serve as a barrier to his operation that surrounds Israel, it's going to be these groups if he does not have them ordered in a very specific and methodical way. Here's something to think about.
I think he wants to use them as a tool against.
It's 100% right. Think about this. Look, you could not be more accurate in making that statement. He sat down with his security contingency, 2.5 years ago, before he went into Ukraine, 3 years ago? And he constantly referred to the western border, sorry, not the western, the eastern border of Israel as being a Russian border. Meaning he's referring to Syria.
Yep.
He's declaring that the Syrian border against Israel is sovereign territory, specifically the portion of the border that is an eye shot from the Golan Heights. He has on multiple occasions in that same meeting, by the way, said that Russia has a right to the use of the Golan Heights. He's made that very, very clear. Nobody came against him. Bennett didn't dispute it.
So
Nobody disputed it.
Is the United States going to stand up against this?
No way. Think about it like this. This is why Putin did it. It's really, really smart. It's really, really smart. The United States has been standing on the table of, we do not support Hamas, but we are fully in support of the idea of the Palestinian Authority coming in, creating a multi-state solution, and absorbing all of what Hamas ruled. So the United States has been pushing the idea of the Palestinian Authority ruling in Gaza, and that being the solution that fixes the problem.
I don't think Israel's going to accept it.
No, of course Israel's not going to accept it. They're not stupid people. Of course they're not going to accept it.
We've done some stupid stuff.
Yeah, but that would be the ultimate stupid, right? Because for all the rhetoric that you see the leaders of Hamas giving, it's way stronger on the Palestinian Authority side. I mean, you think about the things that they say, but if you look at it, Putin is in essence creating an alliance with the only contingency that the United States of America has on the Arab side in Israel, and that is a Palestinian Authority. We have given the United States of America, specifically this particular administration, has given a ton of credibility and recognition to Mahmoud Abbas.
Too much.
And if Mahmoud Abbas's highest ranking guy is about to walk into Russia and sit down and have a meeting about an alliance between them and Islamic Jihad and all of these other organizations, you instantly take the wind out of the United States of America. Because what ground is the U.S. going to stand on now? They can't stand on the ground of the Palestinian Authority when they're making a legitimized alliance with all of these other terrorist organizations, and then to add to that, the blessing of Russia.
We're going to have an interesting week.
Yeah.
What's
Israel going to do? Is Israel going to come against, if Israel then comes against the PA, which they have to in order to maintain the sovereignty that they hold, and they have to, right? Then in essence, what they're going to be doing is invoking Russia. And if Russia says, okay, you can go against the Palestinian Authority, it's not going to go cheap. Russia's going to say, these are the concessions that I need in Syria if you're going to deal with this Palestinian Authority issue. I think the dumbest people in all of this, honestly, the dumbest people in all of this is the Palestinian Authority, because they're walking into a trap.
Oh, yeah.
Russia cares as much of the Palestinian Authority as...
They're being used again.
No, of course they are. Of course they are.
And they're missing another chance to miss a chance.
Well, and that's the problem. The only people at the table in this region that says, hey, Arab, I have something great for you that I want to help you with is Israel.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about next week, James? Well, I
don't even think we can say what we're going to talk about next week, because it just depends on what happens with all the stories.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I honestly, bro, where do we go with this? I have no idea.
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this.
This is the biggest story right here. This might be the biggest of the month.
One of the things I'm curious to see if China ties into this.
I promise you, David, China's already tied into this. Because remember, who brokered the peace agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia?
Oh, yep.
China.
Yep.
And who told China to do that brokering? Russia.
Yeah.
We know that. So they're all tied in. They're all tied in. And I bet you right now, Saudi Arabia is mad as all hell right now. I bet you MBS is ticked off with this.
What do you think Ezekiel is saying right now?
Well, look, this is God setting up the stage for what Ezekiel 38 says is going to happen. These alliances, if you look at the geopolitics of all of this, these alliances are giving Russia an unmitigated amount of power. They are going to be the people that are feared.
They're going to be, they're going to be the tiebreakers. And
are you kidding me?
And the kingmakers.
If Israel has any chance at economic security, like Ezekiel 38 says is going to happen, it's going to happen because of Russia's involvement. And by the way, that shouldn't surprise anybody, because when you read Ezekiel 38, you know that when all of these attackers attack Israel, Israel's going to be shocked, because everyone that attacked them, including Russia, will be their friends at the moment.
Wow.
So when they say never again, I got news for you. It's going to happen again.
Don't scare me.
Yeah, but when I say it's going to happen again, me and you will be gone. You know, that's, Joel and your mom and everybody, your sister, everybody's be gone. We'll all be raptured.
Well, we'll be with Jeff.
Yeah, we'll be with Jeff. Amen. Amen to that.
Together.
Jeff's probably laughing at us right now.
Yeah, well, yeah. Him and my dad are having a good time up there.
Yeah. Jeff's probably looking down.
Him and my dad and your dad. Oof.
Yeah, my Baba. Man, I miss him.
Yep.
He watched every single video I ever made. And every single time we did the video, I waited for a text from him saying, good job, I'm proud of you, good job. He always did every single video I made. He sent me a text and said, good job, baby. Yeah, I miss them already.
Yep.
So, well, there it is, guys. And I got to tell you, we went way too long, so we're not going to do a local session today. So, you want to take a few questions?
Hit me.
Okay, let's go. Let's. If you guys got some questions, give us some questions, and we'll see if we can answer them. I am looking right here. We'll take a question or two. See if we can actually do that.
Where
That's
you get 'em
funny.
again?
Jason Moss. He says, "If there is wine in heaven, then why? What does it say? Then why are we what? Then why won't we have coffee? Oh, there's going to be coffee in heaven. What are you talking about?
Coffee in heaven.
There has to be coffee in heaven.
Well, there's everything in heaven. I mean,
This is come on, especially our coffee, the kind that you used to make me when we were in Israel every time. I think every other stop you made that for
Coffee
me
with
in
head.
your little kit. Yep, it was the best. It was the best coffee in the world.
Yeah, that's some of what I miss.
Okay, here's a question from Brad. I guarantee you this will be a good question. Brad, he's saying, was Turkey and Russia meeting with Hamas and Iran? Probably.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know for sure because we don't have confirmation, but what we do have confirmation of is that we did have a delegation from Turkey that pretty much stays round the clock in Russia.
Yeah,
We know that.
and there's a special how do you say arrangement between Russia and Turkey.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. Remember when the Turks shot down a Russian plane,
Oh, yeah.
and everybody thought it would be a big balagan, and it kind of fizzled out.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're. I mean, if anybody else shot down a Russian plane,
Yeah, that
well,
would
the
be
Syrians
bad.
shot down a Russian plane, and they blamed us for it. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, I do remember that story too. And you know what? That was still never got clarified.
Well,
That's another one. Okay, Daniel Osborne, you say, what's the hook? My guess is the hook in Ezekiel 38 is probably going to be something like an energy resource. Oil, something like that. Maybe gold.
no, it's got to be energy.
Yeah.
It's got to be. It might be the land bridge.
But the problem is maybe because that terminology would not rule out a land mass. I mean, you're probably right. I mean, it could be a viable answer. Okay, here's another one. Will the U.S. retaliate against the Houthis for shooting down the Reaper drone yesterday? They look. My statement to that, Golden Bears, they should have done it already. And because they haven't, my guess is probably not.
This is going to be interesting because this is a little punk poking a finger in the eye of the how do you say, for lack of a better word, the law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the United States is the reason why trade has moved over the oceans. I
Yep.
mean, and here's the Houthis poking a finger in them. They have to retaliate. Otherwise, everybody, I mean, just think about what's going to happen, with the South Africans on the Cape of South Africa. And I don't know. The Colombians are going to stand up and say, okay, we can hold America hostage because we can control what goes in and out of the Panama Canal. I mean, just think, if the Houthis can do this to the United States, the
Yeah,
biggest
imagine.
empire in the States, who else is going to stand up and say,
100%.
okay, I can do this?
And isn't it scary to think that the second largest army in the Middle East is Iran, only second to Turkey? And when I say army, I'm talking about size. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about capability. We know the most capable army is Israel for sure, right? It's not even a question, right? But it is interesting to think about that.
No, I'm going to throw something weird here, okay? If the Houthis can pull this off and live to tell the tale, what keeps Cuba, for instance, from stationing
Nothing.
some long-range rockets on
Nothing.
their soil and saying we're going to control everything that comes in and out of the Gulf?
Nothing other than the fact that the United States of America probably has a better handle on assets in that region than they do in the Mideast. That would be the only thing. And even then, is that more myth or is that a fact? So it's actually a really good question. Jason Moss has this question. This is a good one for you, David. The question is, what chance is there of the U.S. and U.K. pulling off this coup to replace Bibi?
I think Bibi is going to be replaced by the Israelis, no matter what. I mean, at the end of this,
Yeah,
in the way what's going on. I mean, there are too many Israelis that are blaming Mr. Security, is what he called himself for a long time, for what happened on October 7th.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the United States pulling this one off. I mean, Israel is.
I think
kind of,
they're trying to light the match. I think that there's a deep rooted hatred for Bibi. amongst some people in the United States, especially the State Department. I think the State Department doesn't
the
like
State
him.
Department hates Jews. We know that.
Yeah, they're
always did.
Amen. Yeah, and that's not a good thing to say amen to, but that's just ridiculous. And you're right, David. It's a good question. Why do we let Qatar, do a peace agreement when they fund Hamas? It just doesn't make sense. And I think it's a good
I have
question.
a feeling there's something that's going to happen in Qatar. I mean, we aren't the only ones that are fed up with their, for lack of a better word, weaselness. Is that a good word? I don't know if I even made up. We're not the only one that suffer from their weaselness. Don't forget, Al Jazeera is part of the arrangement.
100%.
That is anti-American in the extreme.
Yeah.
On the other hand, okay, the biggest military base in the Middle East, biggest American military base in the Middle East is in Qatar.
Yep.
So I mean, there's this. The Indians used to call him "he who talks with a forked tongue," and they specialize in this.
Okay, here's another one, and this Mike Digman might be a good answer for this. I have the geopolitical thought behind this, but there may be a logistics issue tied here, and I'm going to answer it the best way I think I can, and maybe Michael can confirm it or not. The question here is why won't the U.S. station a carrier group at the or in the Gulf of Aden? My guess is because it's too shallow of a water. I don't think they can. I don't think they can. I think the closest they can get to it is south of the Arabian Peninsula, not on the Yemen side, but on the Oman side. I think they have to do it directly below Oman, and I think that's probably the most they can do it. Because when you start getting into the Gulf of Aden, it's not that the water is not deep enough. It's the fact that when you start getting to the choke point, right, where you see Djibouti, that little area where the choke point, you have a big problem because it's not wide enough. So I think it's a logistics issue.
Is there a
And
carrier group in the Persian Gulf?
I believe there is right now. Yes.
Really?
Yep.
That I don't know, but that would be a good question.
I believe there is a carrier group in the Persian Gulf. I believe
they
war. relocated. I believe they relocated one of the ones they sent to the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf.
Inside the Persian
Gulf.
Meaning behind the horns of the Straits of Hormuz.
I'm almost certain of that.
Interesting.
Michael would know this if he's on watching. He'd probably give us a good answer on that. Because he's a retired lieutenant commander that spent a lot of time in a sub, so he knows all about that. He's a great asset to us. Him and a group of guys right now are actually doing some work for us, which is a blessing.
Well, according to do you know that according to the foreign press, there are a couple of Israeli subs in the Persian Gulf.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Even though Israel doesn't even claim to have any subs.
No, we have subs.
But are you public about that? Are you guys
we
public?
have subs. I mean, I've actually seen them.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
all right. But that's not supposed to be a public thing, is it?
Well, we know we have subs. I mean, if you stand
it's
on
like
top
the
of
nuclears.
we're not talking about nuclear. The existence of the subs. I mean, that's part of the whole BB trial thing.
With the situation outside of Lebanon. Yeah. In that part, which by the way is such a crock of garbage. It's such an irritating. Whatever.
Who else we got?
Do you think? This is Pamela Zanwich. It's a good question. Do you think USA is Babylon in Revelation? No, I think Babylon is Babylon. I actually think where ancient Babylon is what the Babylon is that we're talking about here. And I can tell you this right now, when you start looking at the things that are happening in Iraq and the story of how they're wanting to get involved in a lot of brokering of peace type talks, and they want to become the new Sharm el-Sheikh of the Middle East, we're going in that direction. I mean, you can already see them. They're already rebuilding ancient walls and stuff. So that's a whole other, which Russia had some involvement in trying to shut that down. Now they're actually becoming supporters of it, which is really interesting. But I think that's just them being strategic about what's going on. Jill Masada, this is a fair question. How do we know this rapture is not for decades still? We don't. But what I can tell you is this. I can tell you that we've seen things happen in these last 10 years that we've never seen happen before in human history. And all things that line up with what the Bible says. So, Jill, it's a great question. And the answer to that is we just don't know. And if you hear somebody tell you, oh, the rapture is going to happen on this day, like we had a few people last year say that, oh, the rapture is going to happen on the 19th, or oh, the rapture is going to happen on the 25th.
We've had people in the
Don't
past
listen to
say
them. They're lying. They're not being biblical. We just don't know. I think that the rapture could technically happen any day, right? But we just don't know. It could be any day. It could be any month. It could be any year. It could be in the next 10 years. We just don't know.
By definition, we don't know. Jesus said
For the
we
sake
won't
of
know.
my daughters, I hope it's within 10 years. I don't know. I hope it's
James,
sooner than that.
This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Guys, thank you. You guys are a blessing.
Yes.
Great questions
definitely.
being asked. Jill, it's a good question. A lot of people ask that question, and we should be asking that question because there's a lot of cuckoos out there telling us that the rapture is going to happen, yesterday, or they come up with these dates. And, could it happen tomorrow? Of course it could. But can we give these dates? No, we can't. It's not good. So,
and guys, connect to the Balagan Connection. We're putting up a new clip today.
yep. 2:00. That video is getting released. You want to go there, Balagan Connection. You're going to like it. It's going to be a great video. I just watched it. It's really, really well done. I watched it last night. It's good. It's a good video. All right? Okay. Love you guys. You guys fight the good fight. Let's pray, and we'll get rocking. Father in heaven, we just thank you, Lord, for this time that you've given us, Lord, the time that we can be together and just have a very important discussion about a series of very critical issues. Keep us, Lord, looking to you, excited about what you have for us, Lord, that we would never forget, Lord, these many lessons, Lord, that we need to continue to learn. So, Lord, we just love you. We thank you. We pray that you would keep us looking to you. And we ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And then one more thing, New Year 24. New Year 24, that's a code you can type in right now to Locals and get yourself a big discount. It's an extra free month. Thank you for supporting us there. And we really appreciate your support there, guys. And we thank you so much for that. We love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight. And real quick shout out. I think it's Dean, Michael Digman. Who else, Dale? Who else is in our group? I don't think he can hear me. But you guys that are a part of that, thank you. We appreciate the contribution that you guys are making and the help that you're giving us. You're awesome. You guys are a blessing. So thank you for that. We love you. Keep fighting the good fight. I think Vinny might be part of that group too. Oh, Brad. That's right. How can I forget Brad? All right. Love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight.